If you've ever been betrayed by the one person you trusted most, if someone stole your world and smiled while doing it, then this story is for you. Because 6 years ago, my best friend took everything from me. But last night, at a luxury gala in Dallas, she turned around and saw me standing there, glowing, reborn, holding the hand of the man who changed everything. Before I tell you how her face went pale the moment she saw him, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a true story like this. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine? Mine was plated in crystal, lit by chandeliers, and served with a smile that said, "I remember everything." The night of the Dallas Heritage Gala smelled like champagne and blooming orchids. A soft jazz trio played near the grand staircase, their notes curling through the air like smoke. The ballroom shimmered, polished silverware, Art Deco walls, gowns that whispered six-figure bank accounts. And me. I was standing at the entrance, wrapped in emerald silk, holding the hand of the man who would change everything. Andre Lancaster. He wasn't just my date. He was the symbol of a life rebuilt from ash. But no one knew that yet. Not even him. Not fully. Then I saw her. Across the ballroom, past the velvet ropes and curated smiles, Jessa Monroe. She stood beside Grant, her hand draped casually on his chest, like a woman who thought she'd won. Her laugh was loud, intentional, the kind meant for attention. Her dress was black velvet, cut low. Her ring, my old ring, caught the light like it still had power. She didn't see me at first. That was the best part. She was too busy shining for people who didn't know the story, who didn't know how 6 years ago, she was my best friend, my maid of honor, the woman I called sister, and the one who slid into my marriage like it was hers by birthright. But time has a funny way of revealing truth. When her eyes finally landed on me, they didn't recognize me. Not immediately. I watched her try to place the face, the curve of the cheek, the tilt of the head. And then, when Andre leaned down and whispered something that made me laugh, her expression cracked. It was so subtle, a flicker behind her eyes. But I saw it, that split second where she realized, Camille Hart is not broken. She is not bitter. She is not gone. She is here, glowing, graceful, and somehow more dangerous than ever. Grant followed her gaze. When he saw me, he blinked. Once, then again, like he wasn't sure if I was real. And then Andre took my hand and said, "You okay?" I turned to him, smiling softly. Better than ever. Because the truth is, I wasn't there for them. Not anymore. I wasn't there to prove I survived. I was there because I thrived. And I wanted them to see what healing looks like when it wears heels and holds its head high. But before I tell you how I got here, how the woman who lost everything became the woman who owned the room, you need to understand something. This didn't start at a gala. It started with trust and ended with betrayal. And somewhere in the middle, I found the kind of strength that doesn't just survive fire. It learns to walk through it in silence. So let me take you back. To the day I still believed she was my best friend. And to the moment that belief shattered, forever. There was a time I thought my life was the blueprint for happiness. Not perfect, never perfect, but deeply, quietly good. Back then, mornings in our Highland Park home began with soft jazz echoing from the kitchen and the smell of cinnamon toast curling up the stairs. Grant would read the Dallas Business Journal while sipping his black coffee, always in a crisp button-down even on Saturdays. I'd sit across from him in one of his oversized Oxford shirts, legs tucked under me, reviewing client mood boards on my iPad with a pastry in one hand and a pencil behind my ear. We had rhythm, our own kind of quiet, sophisticated rhythm. Grant Whitmore was the kind of man Dallas adored, polished, charming, with a real estate empire built from inherited grit and strategic timing. Women respected him, men envied him. He was the kind of person who walked into a room and everyone made space, instinctively, And for 5 years, I was the woman beside him, the one he introduced at fundraisers with pride, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, like I was the most delicate, valuable thing in the room. And maybe, for a while, I had my own world too, a boutique interior design firm that had grown faster than I ever imagined. Word of mouth in the right circles, a few features in Southern living, and suddenly, I was being flown out to Charleston and Nashville for historic home restorations. My style? Classic with edge, soft with a whisper of bold. I had found my lane, and I was driving it with grace. At the center of it all was our home, the house Grant and I bought together 3 months after our wedding. A white brick colonial with ivy climbing its sides, antique bronze door handles, and a balcony that caught the golden hour just right. It was the kind of place that made people smile when they walked through the foyer. And it was mine. Ours. Every curtain, every color swatch, every centerpiece, placed with love. And then, there was Jessa. We used to joke that she was my second shadow, from grade school to sorority rush, from college heartbreaks to bridal fittings. Jessa Monroe had been there. The kind of friend who showed up with wine and face masks when you cried, who screamed the loudest at your graduation, who helped you stalk exes on social media without judgment. She was quick-witted, magnetic, and just chaotic enough to make every dull moment sparkle. People loved her, especially men. But I always assumed she had her own invisible boundaries, because I trusted her. I trusted our history. She was the maid of honor at our wedding, stood beside me in a soft blush dress, read a poem she wrote about sisterhood, cried harder than I did during my vows. She gave me a framed collage of childhood photos as a wedding gift with a handwritten note. "You'll always have me, even when everything else changes." I kept it on my nightstand. Jessa never married. She came close once, during our early 30s, but it fizzled before it really began. She blamed it on his lack of ambition. "If I'm going to give my life to someone," she said once over cocktails, "they better be brilliant, rich, or at least obsessed with me, preferably all three." I laughed back then. I shouldn't have. She was around a lot, more than most friends. She had a standing invitation at our house, and she used it. Dropped by for wine nights, watched The Crown with me in her pajamas, helped me rearrange furniture or critique my floral arrangements. She had keys to the house. My house. At first, I found comfort in it. I believed we were building something sacred, a life filled with deep friendships, warm spaces, unshakable love. I believed that success was meant to be shared, and I wanted her to have some of mine. But looking back, there were signs. Little things that pricked like needles if you looked close enough. The way her eyes lingered on Grant when he complimented her. The inside jokes between them that I didn't understand. The occasional overlap in their text history that made me tilt my head, but never ask out loud. "Don't be paranoid," I told myself. "That's Jessa. She flirts with everyone. Besides, Grant wasn't that kind of man." That's what I kept telling myself. One night, after a fundraiser downtown, the three of us were back at the house drinking wine by the fire. I'd changed into sweatpants and curled up on the couch with a throw blanket, tired but content. Jessa was still dressed, hair perfect, lips glossy. And she sat on the floor by Grant's feet, laughing too hard at one of his jokes, brushing something off his pant leg. I remember thinking, she's trying too hard tonight. I didn't say anything. But Grant's laugh that night didn't sound quite the same. My mother used to say that betrayal always starts with silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of being seen, heard, noticed. Something shifts. You just don't realize it until you're on the other side of the damage. The following week, Jessa brought over a bottle of wine. Expensive, rare, one of Grant's favorites. I raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you find this?" I asked. She shrugged. "Oh, I ran into that sommelier Grant mentioned last month. We got to talking, and he recommended it, thought it might cheer you guys up. It was a small thing, too small to argue about. But in hindsight, it was a flicker of something I should have looked at longer. There were more like it. The time she picked up Grant's dry cleaning because she was in the area. Or the time I overheard her whisper something to him in the kitchen before stopping mid-sentence when I entered. Her tone changed. His eyes dropped. They both smiled too quickly. I chalked it all up to stress, to busy schedules, to nothing. Because the truth is, when you're deeply in love and deeply trusting, your mind works overtime to protect the life you've built. You'll bend reality before you let it break you. But cracks don't stay hidden forever. They widen, they deepen, and then, one day, the whole house groans. You just don't know if it's about to fall, or if it already has. It started with a shift so subtle, it could have been anything. A bad week, a busy month, a forgotten moment. At first, I gave him every excuse in the book. Grant was working longer hours. He claimed the market was tightening, the investors getting more skittish. Real estate's about patience, Camille, he'd say. Stressful times. That's all. I believed him. Or I wanted to. Because the alternative would have unraveled everything I thought I knew. He was colder, distant. Kisses became shorter. Conversations, thinner. But I chalked it up to his work, to mine, to adulthood. We hadn't taken a vacation in months. Maybe we just needed a break from the hustle. But then came the missed dinners, the strange calls he took in the other room, the way he started sleeping on the edge of the bed, turning his back to me. I asked, softly, one night, "Are we okay?" He turned the lamp off and answered, "I'm just tired." 3 words that told me everything and nothing at all. Jessa, meanwhile, was more present than ever. She dropped by with takeout and excuses. Thought you two could use a break from cooking. She'd open wine, talk about her dating disasters, and make offhand comments like, "If I ever find a man like Grant, I swear I'll chain him to the bed." She laughed. I didn't. Still, I said nothing, because saying something would mean confronting something, and I wasn't ready for that yet. One afternoon, I came home early from a client meeting and caught a glimpse of them through the kitchen window. She was leaning over the island, laughing, her hand brushing his forearm. Grant looked up at her in a way I hadn't seen him look at me in months, with ease, familiarity. When I walked in, they both jumped slightly. Jessa smiled too quickly. "Cam, we were just talking about you." I nodded. "I'm sure you were." That night, I lay awake long after they both left. The silence in our bedroom pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't name. I remembered the framed photo Jessa had given me on our wedding day. I found it in the guest room drawer the next morning and flipped it face down. Something wasn't right. I started checking small things. Habits, receipts. I wasn't looking to catch him. I was looking for reassurance. Something that told me I was just paranoid. That I was spiraling for no reason. But I found nothing. Nothing. Until the earring. It was under the passenger seat of Grant's car, a delicate gold loop with a tiny sapphire. I knew it wasn't mine. I hadn't worn anything like that in years, but I had seen them before. On Jessa. She wore them to our engagement party. A gift from her grandmother, she once told me. I remember admiring them. When I held the earring up to Grant that evening, he didn't flinch. "Oh, that's Jessa's," he said, too casually. "I gave her a ride to an event last week. She must have dropped it." My heart beat louder than his answer. "You didn't tell me that." He shrugged. "Didn't think it mattered. You were out of town." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in our marriage more than I wanted to believe in my own instincts. But doubt, once planted, grows fast. I called Jessa the next morning. "Found your earring in Grant's car," I said. There was a pause. Then, "Oh, thank God, I thought I lost it for good. He gave me a ride when my Uber canceled. I didn't think you'd mind. 2 stories. Perfectly aligned. Too perfect. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the floor for a long time. It wasn't the earring. It was the choreography. The way their lies danced so easily together, like a well-rehearsed duet. Still, I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I tried harder. I booked us a weekend getaway. Grant canceled last minute. Investor meeting. I cooked his favorite meal. He ate 3 bites and said he had to catch up on emails. I bought new lingerie. He said he was too tired. I felt myself shrinking. Piece by piece, I was becoming invisible in my own life. The night everything broke open was a Thursday. I had planned a quiet dinner at home. Steaks, red wine, candles. Grant called around 6:30. "I'm sorry, babe. Can't make it. Something urgent came up with a client." I told him it was okay. I'd save him a plate. But something in me had snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just waited. At 9 p.m., I got in my car, drove past his office. It was dark. Past the gym, empty. My hands shook as I called him again. Straight to voicemail. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Jessa's building. Her car was there. His was there. And the lights in her apartment window, our old 3rd-floor view when we used to have wine nights, were on. I sat in my car for 23 minutes. I didn't need to go upstairs. I didn't need to knock. I already knew. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in silence. I didn't scream. I didn't shatter a vase. I just let the truth settle over me like snow. The next morning, I packed a suitcase and left it by the door. Grant came home just after 7 a.m., tie undone, jacket in his hands. He looked surprised to see me awake. "I want the truth," I said, voice steady. He paused. "Camille." I held up a hand. "No excuses, no spin, just the truth." He sighed, sat down on the edge of the couch. "It started after your birthday," he said. "I don't know why. It just happened." I nodded. "And Jessa?" "She said she didn't mean to, that she fought it, but you didn't." "No," he admitted. "I didn't." That was the moment my heart stopped trying to fight for him. Jessa showed up the next day, unannounced. Tears, lipstick smudged. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. I looked at her like I didn't recognize her. "You wore my friendship like a costume. And when it no longer fit, you took my husband instead. Cam, please." "No, you don't get to cam me anymore." She flinched. I closed the door in her face. The days after that moved in slow motion. I withdrew from clients, returned my wedding ring, blocked their numbers. Friends took sides. Some reached out. Most didn't know what to say, but Aunt Celeste did. She left a voicemail. "Sugar, don't stay there and rot. Pain is a signal. Get up and go where your soul can breathe." That night, I booked a flight to New Orleans. I left the house keys on the counter, and I didn't look back. There's a silence that comes after heartbreak that no music can fill. It isn't quiet, it's thick, like wet wool wrapped around your chest. Like every sound in the world is muffled underwater. It's not just about being alone, it's about being erased. That's how it felt in the weeks after I walked out of that house. Not like I left a marriage, but like I disappeared from my own life. I moved into a suite at the Adair, one of those long-stay boutique hotels with monochrome linens and concierge staff who know not to ask questions. I told no one but my lawyer. He was the one who handled the documents, the assets, the press-ready statement. Due to personal matters, Camille Hart Design will be taking a temporary hiatus. It sounded clean. It wasn't. I barely spoke for days. I ordered room service and didn't touch the food. I sat in front of the window and stared at the skyline I once adored, waiting for the sun to move. I watched TV on mute, as if subtitles could distract me from the voice screaming in my own head. How did I not see it coming? That question became a loop, a mantra of self-blame. Because I wasn't just mourning the loss of a man. I was mourning the death of my intuition. I prided myself on reading people, creating emotion through design. But somehow, I missed the wrecking ball 2 inches from my heart. At night, I'd lie in bed replaying everything. Grant's expressions, Jessa's offhand comments, the way their stories matched too perfectly when I asked about the earring. How she always called him darling like a joke, one I was too naive to find threatening. And worse, the little voice in me that had noticed but stayed silent. I remember waking up one morning, if you could call it that, since I hadn't really slept, and realizing I hadn't stepped outside in 4 days. My hair was greasy, my robe smelled like sweat and sadness, and my phone had 37 unread messages. I didn't read any of them. I just stared at the screen and whispered, I don't want this life anymore. That thought scared me. I didn't mean I wanted to die. I meant I couldn't survive another day in that version of myself, the woman who let others define her, who smiled politely while her world burned, who stayed quiet to keep the peace, and got crushed by it. I needed out. Of Dallas, of the narrative, of the history wrapped around my throat like a noose dressed in pearls. That's when I called Aunt Celeste. Celeste was my mother's younger sister, the family wild card. Never married, fiercely independent, with red hair she never dyed even as it faded to soft silver. She ran a vintage shop in New Orleans and hosted full moon dinners for artists, chefs, and jazz musicians who needed a place to belong. She picked up on the second ring. "Baby?" she said, her voice immediately serious. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She sighed. "When's your flight?" "I haven't booked one yet," I whispered. "I'll make up the guest room," she replied. "You'll stay as long as you need." "And Camille?" "Yes. You will heal. But first, you have to get the hell out of Texas." I let out the first real laugh I'd had in days. It caught in my throat like something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. The next morning, I packed 2 suitcases. Just the essentials. Clothes, my sketchbooks, my grandmother's ring, and the journal I hadn't written in for months. I left everything else, the rest of my wardrobe, my design awards. The scented candles I used to light during client meetings, even my wedding album. I left it in a drawer with a note taped to the front. "Take what you stole and keep it. I'm not carrying it anymore." At the airport, I wore sunglasses indoors and avoided eye contact. Even though no one was looking for me, it felt like everyone could see the wreckage in my posture. The woman who once curated the most elegant spaces in Dallas now dragging emotional baggage in a battered carry-on. The flight to New Orleans was short. The transformation it triggered would be anything but. Celeste met me at baggage claim in leopard print and combat boots. "Still love a dramatic entrance," I said as I walked into her arms. She pulled back and cupped my face. "Oh, sugar, they broke your heart, didn't they?" "They tried," I said. She smiled. "Good. Let's remind you who you were before all that mess." Her house was tucked between moss-draped oaks in the Marigny, lavender walls, chipping shutters, porch swing that creaked in time with the wind. It smelled like cedar, mint tea, and safety. I slept for 2 days. When I finally emerged, Celeste had stocked the kitchen with everything I used to love. Sourdough, sharp cheddar, blackberry jam, and dark roast coffee. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She just left me space to sit in my grief without apologizing for it. Some days I couldn't speak. Some days I cried through breakfast. Some days I sat on the porch in silence while the city moved around me like a stranger I didn't know how to greet. But little things helped. The hum of a saxophone down the block. The way light filtered through stained glass windows in the church across the street. The neighbors who waved without needing to know my name. The slow rhythm of a place that didn't rush me to be okay. One evening, Celeste came out with a box. "What's this?" I asked. "Your old college portfolio," she said. "I found it in my attic. Figured it might remind you what you're capable of." Inside were sketches I hadn't seen in a decade. Raw, bold, alive. Spaces designed not to impress, but to feel. I ran my fingers over the charcoal lines and whispered, "She's still in there." "Damn right she is," Celeste said, lighting a sage bundle. "Now let's bring her back." I began sketching again. Nothing grand, just little ideas, a reading nook, a reimagined sunroom. I helped Celeste rearrange her store display and felt a flicker of satisfaction I hadn't known I missed. Design had always been my voice, even when my mouth couldn't form words. And slowly, it came back. One afternoon, Celeste and I sat on the porch with sweet tea and no agenda. She looked at me sideways. "Do you know what your real superpower is? Wit? Cheekbones? Humble disposition?" She laughed. "Grace, that's your superpower, but not the soft kind, the kind that stands up in the fire and refuses to burn bitter." I stared out at the street. What if I don't want to be graceful? What if I want revenge? She sipped her tea. "Then earn it with a life so radiant, they have to squint to look at you." I didn't respond, but in that moment, I made a promise to myself. This pain would not be the last word. This betrayal would not be the final chapter. And this version of me, broken, bruised, but still breathing, would be the beginning of something they never saw coming. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on the door and say, "You're ready now." It tiptoes in. It hides in the ordinary, the sound of your own breath during quiet mornings, the satisfaction of folding fresh laundry, the way light changes across a room you once found too quiet. In New Orleans, healing came disguised as routine. I woke early. I walked. I wrote. I watered Celeste's plants even when they didn't need it. I drank coffee on the porch while strangers passed and didn't know my story. For the first time in years, I belonged to no one but myself. I started sketching again, not for clients, not for deadlines, just for the love of space. I drew rooms filled with warmth, imperfect details, textures that told stories, designs with heart, not polish. And for a while, that was enough. But something shifted when I met Andre Lancaster. He didn't arrive like a movie scene. No slow-motion entrance, no instant chemistry. It was simpler than that. I was helping Celeste redesign her storefront, rearranging bookshelves and repainting the back office, when a man walked in asking for vintage glassware. He was tall, calm, soft-voiced, wore glasses, dark jeans, and a linen shirt like he didn't care what anyone thought. Not in a careless way, but in the kind that comes from having nothing to prove. Celeste whispered after he left, "That man is too emotionally grounded to be straight." I laughed. "You might be right." He returned a few days later, this time for antique lighting fixtures, and then again, asking about a framed French map that had been in the window. By the fourth visit, I finally asked, "Are you redecorating or just looking for excuses to be here?" He smiled. "Can it be both?" He introduced himself as Andre, a real estate investor focused on restoring historic homes. He had just moved to the city from New York, wanted to bring old properties back to life without stripping them of soul. Celeste lit up. "Then you two need to talk." We grabbed coffee the following week, talked about design, architecture, the psychology of space. He asked questions, real ones, not the kind that waited to be answered so he could talk about himself. I found myself leaning in, not because I wanted to impress him, but because I didn't feel the need to. We began working together. I consulted on a few of his projects, French Quarter brownstones, Garden District estates. He respected my eye. He deferred to my instincts. And when we disagreed, he listened without defending. At first, I told myself it was just business. But then there was the day we walked through a gutted 1910 townhouse. The sun poured through broken windows, dust danced in the air, and we stood in what used to be the dining room. I talked about opening the space, exposing the beams, building a bookshelf wall from reclaimed wood. He turned to me and said, "The way you see space, it's like you're healing it." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever described my work like that. Like it had meaning beyond aesthetics. I felt it in my chest, a crack opening, not from pain, but from light trying to get in. Still, I kept him at a distance. I canceled dinner once without giving a reason. I avoided personal questions. I flinched when he reached to brush hair from my face during a site visit. I wasn't ready, not fully. But Andre never pushed, never asked why. He just showed up, respectfully, steadily. And then came the panic attack. It was a networking event. Real estate developers, design consultants, too much cologne and too many expectations. Andre invited me as his guest, hoping I could meet a few potential clients. I told myself I could handle it, that I'd wear something sleek and show up like the woman I used to be. But 20 minutes in, I couldn't breathe. Someone mentioned Grant's name in passing. Said he'd lost out on a deal to a firm out of New York. My ears rang. The room blurred. The glass in my hand slipped. I turned and bolted toward the terrace, my chest tightening with each step. Andre found me there, hands shaking, eyes blurred, gulping air like I'd been drowning. He didn't touch me. He just sat beside me, quiet, present. When my breath returned, I whispered, "I'm not who I used to be." "Good," he said. "I like who you are now." I cried then, harder than I expected. And for the first time, I told someone the full story. Not the version with clean edges, but the messy, bruised, bitter truth. The marriage, the betrayal, the silence afterward. Andre listened, not with pity, not with solutions, but with the kind of presence that made my pain feel seen without being magnified. "I lost everything," I said. "You didn't," he replied. "You left what tried to destroy you. That's different." From that night on, things shifted. We still didn't rush, but I stopped hiding. We spent weekends exploring antique markets, cooking in Celeste's kitchen, walking along the Mississippi with no destination. We shared books, playlists, childhood stories. He told me about his divorce, how his ex-wife had fallen in love with a business partner and taken half his company with her. He'd rebuilt from scratch, with fewer illusions and more peace. "You learn what you won't compromise after that kind of heartbreak," he said one night. "And when you find someone who makes you feel safe again, you protect it." Months passed. My work flourished. Clients from Dallas reached out again, and I said no without hesitation. I wasn't the woman they remembered. I didn't need their validation. Then came the magazine feature. A New York-based design editor stumbled across my Instagram, the one I posted to more for myself than anyone else. She emailed asking for an interview. A week later, Modern Southern Living called me a visionary of texture, memory, and emotional restoration. The article went viral in design circles. And then, the invitation arrived. Dallas Heritage Gala. They wanted to honor Southern women redefining space and story. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stared at the email for 10 minutes. Then I forwarded it to Andre with one line. "You think I'm ready?" He replied, "You were born ready, but now you're prepared." That night, I stood in front of the mirror and saw something I hadn't in years, my full self, not just dressed in beauty, but wrapped in wisdom. I didn't go back to Dallas for closure. I went back to show the woman who lost everything, what she became when she stopped fighting for people who didn't know how to hold her. The Dallas skyline didn't look the same anymore. It wasn't that it had changed. It was me. The woman stepping off the plane in a custom black silk jumpsuit and gold cuff wasn't there to win anything back. She had already won. She was the prize now. And yet, I won't lie. My heart beat like a drum as the Uber curved down the Highland roads. Familiar streets, familiar ghosts, places where the past had burned itself into brick. The gala was held at the Belmont Conservatory, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble columns, and a chandelier so grand it felt like a galaxy. I had attended it once before. With Grant, years ago. I remember thinking it felt like the future. Now, it felt like a stage. I stepped out of the car, heels clicking, eyes forward, cameras flashed. My name was whispered down the carpet. Camille Hart. The feature article had done its work. People were waiting to meet me now, not as someone's wife, not as a +1, but as a headline. Inside, the room shimmered with soft jazz and curated decadence. Waiters glided with champagne flutes. Women in silk leaned into polite laughter. And there, across the room, stood the storm I'd once called home, Grant. And beside him, Jessa. They were older now, not visibly, but energetically. Like their shine had dulled just enough to make room for regret. Grant saw me first. He froze. Eyes widened. Then quickly adjusted his expression into something neutral, like seeing me was no big deal. But his hands betrayed him. He rubbed them together, twice. He only did that when he was nervous. Then Jessa turned. For a moment, she didn't recognize me. My hair was shorter, my body stronger, my energy unshakable. When it clicked, she blinked, then froze. That's when I smiled, not out of cruelty, but because I had nothing left to prove. I didn't walk toward them right away. I let them watch me be admired. I let them see the new world I built without them. The way editors leaned in. The way architects asked my opinion. The way I laughed, free, unforced, real. They approached eventually. Of course they did. Camille, Grant said first, extending a hand like we were old business partners. I tilted my head. Grant! His eyes searched my face for some sign of warmth, or maybe weakness. He found neither. You look incredible, he said, voice caught somewhere between awe and guilt. Thank you, I replied. New city? New life? Jessa stepped in awkwardly. It's been a long time, she said, trying for casual. Yes, I said, sipping my drink. It has. Silence. Then Jessa offered a brittle smile. I saw the magazine piece. You're really doing well. I nodded. I am. There was something almost pitiful in her eyes. She looked like a woman who thought she was still holding a sword, only to realize it was made of wax. Grant cleared his throat. I've been meaning to. Don't. I cut in gently. We're not doing that here. He stopped mid-sentence. I glanced between them. You know, I used to wonder what I'd say if we ever crossed paths again. Jessa shifted. Camille. But I realized, I continued, nothing I say could match what life already said for me. They both stood still. I lost everything, I said softly, and I still came out richer. Then I turned slightly, my tone velvet but steel. You didn't break me. You freed me. That was the line. I watched it land. Grant's mouth opened, closed. Jessa's mascara trembled. I wish you both peace, I added. But I have no room for your names in my next chapter. Then I walked away, not out of spite, but out of arrival. Andre was waiting by the balcony, drink in hand, tie slightly loosened. He smiled when I approached. Everything okay? I nodded. It is now. We clinked glasses. Behind us, the chandeliers blurred into soft galaxies of light. I rested my hand on his arm, not out of need, but choice. Later that night, as the gala wound down and guests faded into limousines and after-parties, I stood at the conservatory steps and looked out over the Dallas skyline one last time. It hadn't changed, but I had. And that was all that mattered. The plane lifted off from Dallas with barely a whisper, as if the past had finally learned how to let go quietly. I stared out the window at the city shrinking beneath us. Lights flickered in rows, highways, office towers, neighborhoods that once knew my name, but they no longer held me. The weight they carried for years, gone, like dust shaken from silk. Andre sat beside me, asleep, head tilted slightly toward the aisle. Even in rest, he looked solid, steady. I turned to him and smiled, not because of what he was to me, but because of what I had become beside him. When we landed in New Orleans, the air greeted me like an old friend. Warm, dense, honest. The kind that clings to your skin and whispers, "You made it." Celeste was waiting outside baggage claim, leaning against her car, arms crossed like a proud general surveying her soldier's return. "Well, look who walked through fire and came back glowing," she said. "I did more than walk," I told her. "I danced through it by the end." She threw her head back and laughed. Now that's the Camille I knew was still in there. Back at her house, everything felt the same. The lavender walls, the chipped windows, the porch swing that still creaked with every breeze. But I was different now. Not a guest, not a refugee, but a woman who had chosen herself and returned home with no apology. In the days that followed, I unpacked more than my suitcase. I unpacked memories I no longer feared, dreams I had once shelved, ideas I was finally ready to build. Andre stayed for a week, helped with a few renovation clients, cooked breakfast while barefoot, read poetry out loud at night like it was gospel. He never asked what came next, never pushed for promises. He just loved me in real time, with no expectation of being the center of my world. That, I realized, was the difference. Grant wanted me to orbit him. Andre wanted me to shine, even if that light had nothing to do with him. One evening, we stood on the balcony of one of his renovation projects, a nearly finished townhome overlooking Esplanade. The sun was setting, casting gold across the rooftops. "I don't know what this is yet," I said, motioning between us. He nodded. "We don't have to name it. Let's just keep building it." I leaned my head on his shoulder. For once, I didn't need certainty to feel safe. Weeks passed. I launched a new design studio, Hard and Hollow, a name that spoke both to what had been lost and what had been found. Clients came not for glamour, but for soul, for intention, for spaces that healed. Every time I stepped into a new room, I asked, what pain needs to be cleared here? What story needs to be retold? That's what I did now. I helped people transform the spaces they felt stuck in, because I had lived it. I knew the walls grief built. I knew the light that returns when you finally knock them down. And one morning, sipping tea on Celeste's porch as jazz floated through the streets, I opened my old journal and wrote a letter I never intended to send. To the woman who stole my husband. Thank you. Not because you hurt me, but because you showed me what needed to break. Thank you for forcing me out of the box I built around myself, for making me face the silence I'd learned to live with, for giving me no choice but to choose myself. I wish you nothing, not hate, not grace, just nothing, because my life no longer pivots around yours. Sincerely, the woman you thought you buried, who turned the dirt into bloom. I closed the journal, exhaled slowly, and looked out at the city that raised me back from the dead. And I knew, deeply, fully, this wasn't just a comeback story. It was a rebirth,